What happens when law, business, and life collide? Each week on Lead Counsel, your host Tom Tona will take a deep dive into topics related to the law, the business of law, and life. There will be insightful discussions with industry insiders, experts, and thought leaders making significant contributions and meaningful differences in their fields of expertise. Tom is the founder and managing attorney at TonaLaw. He has been a practicing attorney since 1994 and the leader of TonaLaw since it opened in 2001. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with free information on law and the business of law, and to give you actionable tools related to each of these areas. Now, here's Tom.
Yo, what's going on? Welcome to the Lead Counsel Podcast. It's your host, Tom Tona. I'm here with Joyful Jules. Joyful Jules, what's going on?
Hello, welcome back.
Jules, why are you smirking? It's the holidays. You're full of joy, aren't you?
I'm smirking because the nickname is
yeah,
new.
Well, you're full of joy, so of course it's new.
Jumping with joy over here.
So, Jules, we got a really cool guest today that I'm excited to have on. His name is Jake Thompson. Jake's got an infectious energy, and I first heard him speak at the Atticus Summit, which is at the end of the year. So, Jake is a published author. He wrote a book called Compete Every Day. It's available on Amazon. He's also got an audiobook available read by him on Audible. And he's also got a executive coaching company. He's very high energy. And I love the premise of compete every day. And you know me and you know why I love that premise, which we'll get into in a little bit in the podcast. So without further ado, here's the podcast with Jake Thompson, Joyful Jules, and your host, Tom Tona. Jake, welcome to the show. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me today. Excited to be here.
And I'm excited to have you. When I first saw you, because I'm a sneakerhead, and Jules is a sneakerhead, you were wearing a really nice suit up on stage at the Atticus Summit in October. And you had on the matching, were they Nike Dunks?
They were Dunks.
See that? You see
custom
that?
Dunks, yeah.
I love the look. And I was like, I don't know if I could pull that off. I mean, I like a good custom-made suit, but I don't know if I could pull off the sneakers with it.
Dude, you got to match it. I was maroon suit then, so I had the custom Dunks with Compete on the back.
Yes.
And then I have a navy suit and matching navy Dunks. And then I've got a couple pairs of Jordans I'll wear depending on what the jacket or the suit is.
I mean, you were pulling it off flawlessly. I don't know a lot of people that can pull that off, but you were pulling it off really, really well. So
Appreciate it.
So let's talk about Compete Every Day.
Yep.
Right? It's the name of your company, correct?
It is.
Okay. And you published a book under the same name.
Yep.
And you got a podcast by the same name.
I try to make it easy on everyone to find me, right?
Well, you are a triple threat, and which means I now got to start listening to the podcast because I haven't listened to the podcast yet, but I have started listening to the book, and it sucked me right in because I'm a competitor, right? And I love what you're talking about. So what does Compete Every Day, the company, do?
Yeah. So we've done a lot of things over the years. The way I best position it now is we help leaders get better results. So we started back in the day as an apparel company, selling t-shirts out of the trunk of my car, didn't know any better, motivational message. Right. As it grew, I've always been a fan of sports psychology, leadership development, performance, just studied it, talked to people about it. More people I talked to, more stuff we put out, more opportunities people would ask, come teach our team. So about 2018, we shifted the company. The podcast released in 2017. 2018, I started speaking. 2020, the first book came out. And so really now everything we do is designed to say, hey, we're here to help you get better results. And you can pick up the book, you can listen to the podcast, you get my next book, which is about to come out. All of that with tactical things to implement. And then we know from what's called Enclothed Cognition, which is the psychological study of how what we wear impacts us, right? You've got a big court case. What are you going to do? You're going to wear your lucky shirt. Or in my case, like I said, I'm hitting stage. I've got Dunks or Jordans on. Because we know confidence is found in some of the things we wear. We have those go-to items. And so there's a correlation between what you wear and your performance. The old Deion Sanders look good, feel good, play good really resonates. And so then we still have the apparel as a way to reinforce the messages, the mentality, not only for that person you see in the mirror, but the other people around you, because what you wear tells other people what's important and what matters to you. And so we try to put messages and things that are going to not only encourage that person in the mirror, but hopefully those people watching you as a leader.
I love that. I love that.
Such an interesting backstory too.
Oh, it's been a wild ride.
It's crazy. You started as a clothing company. When I listened to you speak, I'm like, first of all, I know that you coached yourself, right? You went to a public speaking entity. What was the name of that entity again? I know it's a pretty well-known
So I've gone through
company.
a couple. So I have a habit, because I did not early in my career. I was like, I'm going to figure this out, right? I'm going to be the guy that says I can get this figured out. I learned very quickly it's a lot easier to speed up success with coaching and relationships, right? I knew it in sports, but getting out of my own stubborn way. So I worked initially with a group called Heroic Public Speaking, Michael and Amy Port. They have a phenomenal company out of the New Jersey, Pennsylvania area on the performance side. But I finished the program and was like, I don't know how to build a business. I don't know how to go and build anything with regards to it. I'm good on stage, but what else do I do? So then I went and worked with a group out of Nashville called the Speaker Lab to learn the business side. And then since then, about every 18 to 24 months, I hire a coach or jump into a program specifically designed to learn certain things. So my coach of the last 2 years, we just wrapped up. For this year, I hired her because I said, here's where I am in my speaking business. Here's where I know you've been. I'm trying to figure out where that gap is, how to bridge that gap. And so we worked for 2 years on that process. Going into 2024, I've got my eye on a couple of other targets. So I'm trying to determine what I'm going to do there. But I'm very intentional of what's the goal. And now who can I find to help me speed up that path to getting there?
That is so interesting. I mean, I don't know if you've heard any of our podcasts, but I talk a lot about the coaching that I employ, right?
Yeah.
And we've kind of assembled a team of killer executive coaches that play different roles. I have one guy who's a fractional COO/CEO type, and I have a fractional CFO. And again, it's very similar to what you're talking about. And people are like, well, I spend like 6 figures a year on coaching and masterminds. But it's very deliberate, right? Because there's always an ROI. And as long as I see the growth I want to see, I know
not only
I
that,
can't
the time, right? The time you save to learn. I mean, it speeds it up.
Yeah.
Speeds it up.
Yeah. So when we crossed 20 people in the organization, I was like, I need a system. So we purchased a coach that is EOS.
Yep.
Right. So we did traction. We just are finishing up our first 12 months and it's been breakneck speed growth. And I was talking about it with Jules. It's painful, right? That kind of pain, that is some painful, explosive growth. So you've already given me a lot to unpack. I knew I was going to like talking to you. I was going to get excited. I was going to want to talk to you. I love your theory also about the clothing. I personally think that as soon as an attorney can afford to do it, and I'm just going to speak in my space, custom-made suits have to happen because, you feel different when you show up and you own the room and everybody knows, oh my God, look at that suit. Look at the cut of that suit. And I noticed that about you. When you were on stage, I was like, you had my attention before you said a word with the way you would dress. I just brought it up first thing on the podcast, right? Was the sneakers. We're sneakerheads.
So the thing you even said there, so think about this, right? You went and got a coach to help implement EOS traction. What I would say is instead of being a lawyer starting it, who's doing it really well and how can I partner, right? So like for me, we've moved away from the apparel game. I wear, like you said, I wear tailored suits. I have a couple of dress shirts. Like there's really 3 companies I wear. Because I'm like, these guys have the fit. I have an affiliate relationship, so I can refer people their direction for a discount. I can get rewarded on it. But instead of us being like, man, I love this stuff, we should go make it as part of our brand. Like, who does it really well? Who can I partner with? Just like, who's a coach who does this really well? Who's a community that's thriving in this area that I need to spend more time with? And that's what I'm going to go do. Because at the end of the day, like, you can make more money. You can never make more time.
So you seem to have a really crystallized idea of where you want to go based on like just year to year.
Yeah.
So my question is, like, when you started your company, you guys started as a clothing company. What was the goal you had in mind? Like, did you always plan to become a motivational speaker?
No, we had no idea. So it's really funny. When I started, I tried 3 or 4 things before Apparel. None of them just worked. My best friend was my roommate at the time. He was like, hey, there's a company out of Boston called Life is Good. Stick figure guy, ironically named Jake. Why don't you try t-shirts? So I put money into a couple of boxes of shirts and tanks, started selling them, and was like, let's see what happens. As it grew, my initial focus was, how do we grow a clothing brand? How do we build an apparel brand? And so I'm looking and trying to study custom production and manufacturing and all of this. And I realized throughout that process, I don't have that attention to detail. Like, I'm not the guy who's going to sit there and study every inch of that fabric cut. And I know what I like and I know pieces of it. But my goal was never when I started, was build the biggest apparel brand. And the goal was, I believe people will change their life, their career, their relationships if they wake up and learn to compete every day with themselves over anyone else. Like, that was the fundamental belief. I just put it on shirts as a vehicle to use it. Never thought about speaking. 2014, I go to Texas Children's Hospital, which is one of the largest hospitals in Houston, and do a big event for their HR week. They bought shirts for everybody. They asked me to come speak. I was like, about what? They're like, just come tell your story. So I show up at this event in the complete opposite of what I looked like at the Atticus Summit. I have a backwards fitted baseball cap, t-shirt, jeans, like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I fumble through this story. Hey, I've been in business for 3 years. Here's why this message matters. Here's what we've seen. Here's what I've learned. Afterwards, the VP pulled me aside. Linda Aldridge, to this day, I'm grateful for her. And she goes, you need to go do more of this. Like, there is something here that you haven't thought about. At the time, I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like, I'm focused on building apparel. And so she planted a seed. It was a cool experience, but that was it. Flash forward 2.5 years later, 2 years later. It's mid to summer 2016. Business is growing. We're having our best sales years to date. I'm traveling the country, though, working expos, CrossFit competitions, fitness events, rock and roll marathons, like going all over. The business is growing, but I'm exhausted from every weekend being on the road when at the time my wife, my friends, like everybody was off work. And I'm like, well, I'm never seeing anybody. At the same time, anybody that listening knows about products-based business, like, you're always buying inventory. You go sell 20,000, you turn around, cut a check for 15 more. Like, you always have to have product. And I was exhausted of that because I'd accumulated debt building the company because I all self-funded it. And it was just like, this is taking forever. So I saw a guy that taught speakers. This guy, Michael Port, saw him do a breakout at a marketing conference and was like, that's really cool. Like, the craft of it, I'd never thought about. You see the Tony Robbins, the guys on stage, but you never think about the actual art of it. So I watched him and thought, that's really cool. He had a conference, looked it up. It was, I don't know, $4,000, $4,500, which was more than I'd paid for a conference ticket at that point. But I was like, maybe I want to go look at it. It's Safeway. Let me look at it, go do it. As I'm getting on the airplane, I'm in Vegas for an event. I'm taking a red eye to Fort Lauderdale for this conference. I get an email from the second person who changed my trajectory. And this is a young woman named Samantha McCain, or Samantha Alexander now. She at the time was the assistant director for the PR Association of Mississippi. She worked for Southern Miss there in Hattiesburg. They were hosting the state PR conference. She asked if I would keynote, send me an email. She'd been a customer of my brand for years. Hey, would you do a keynote for us? So, love to. No idea what you want me to talk about. Here's the theme. Just come tell your story. So I go to this speaker conference. I now have a keynote that I'm about to do. I go through their program. But when I finished the talk in April for Samantha's event, April of 17, she looks at me and says 2 things. You need to raise your fees and you need to go do this. Like, you need to do this. And I said,
she saw the value in it.
Yeah. And I tell her and Linda this to this day, like, you saw something in my path that I never realized was there. And so once that happened, I was like, I think this is where we want to go. Like, I really think we can help change people's habits and actions, which will change their mindsets, which will change the ripple effect throughout everyone. So now it became, over the last 5 years, of how do we take what was making us a ton of money and attention in apparel and really start to change the focus. And that was, to your point, growth sucked, right? We had to take some steps back. We had to work through that process. Painful. But it was through that process, we've gotten to a point now, and I still don't think we're quite there, that we're really aligned with what we do well and how we make the biggest impact. And so it was never that. The biggest catalyst change is, as you know, if you heard from the event, the biggest catalyst change was when I was in the midst of accumulating debt and trying to grow the apparel company, that I realized my focus was in the wrong place. I got distracted from building the brand to how do I make sure that I, as the CEO of a company, don't look like I'm the guy selling the t-shirts, that I'm working the expo, that we're a small group. I was more concerned about ego. I wanted to look big, play big, all of that. I was tired of being in the process. I wanted to be the success. And that got me into trouble. And when I switched gears and just started saying, how do I get better? How do I make our business better today? How do I get better today? Everything started to change. And that process in itself is a tough thing. But what it does is it really focuses your competition on yourself. And every day, what's one thing I'm doing to get better? What's one thing I'm doing to make our business better? And you get your eyes off of getting the attention and looking perfect and trying to win approval and just say, how do we win? And the thing about it is, once you win, everybody's going to give you that attention, and they're going to want to take you to coffee and take you to lunch, because when you see success, you want to know, how'd you get there so I can too?
Right.
But the problem most of us make, and that I made, is we get so caught up focusing on the success versus the path to improvement.
So we got to unpack that, right? And I'm going to tell you why. And I've been in business now, we started the business in 2001. So 22 years, going on 23 years this year.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And I never stopped to think about the role of ego in business until very recently, because I've had some interesting interactions with some insurance carriers. And I was like, oh God, they're just so stuck in their position, and it's all ego related. And like, I'm not an ego guy. I'm about as humble and as transparent with my flaws, and there's more flaws than I care to admit. And what I don't know, and I surround myself with brilliant people, right? And I don't look at age. Age is a number. And I go, okay, I don't care how old Jules is. She's brilliant at her job, and I would never want to work with anybody else in marketing. And same thing for my HR person. I never realized just how deep-seated the ego is in decision-making, and the fact that if you don't overcome that, that's what holds you back.
It's
right?
the protection. Like, we're constantly wanting to protect it.
It's unbelievable.
It is. And that's the wild part. Like, to a degree, ego helps, right? You've got to have a little bit of ego to have that drive to go get better. Like, there's something to it. I laugh. Like, I'm still a competitive guy. I have friends that are speakers, and we laugh. Like, when you're on stage at an event, if we're at the same event, I hope you crush it. I'm going to sit in the front row. I'm going to take notes. I'm going to cheer you on. However, when it's my turn, I'm going on stage with the idea that I'm going to be the best one here. I'm going to blow you all away. Like, I love you. I want to see you do well, but like, I'm here to, but that's like, in that moment, I'm here to do the best. However, the problem is, most of us, all we care about is protecting that ego. So like, we get into groups and community, like Summit, like we go to places like that. We never talk about challenges or struggles. We want everybody to think we're perfect and everything's hunky dory. And when we do that, we don't actually have real conversations. And without real conversations, we don't learn and we don't get better.
And we don't change. We don't change.
We don't grow, because, man, if I try something new, I may not be that good at it. And if I'm not that good at it, it could look bad on me. I don't want to do that. Like, and I know those people. Those people, they're like, I can't post that on social media. It's not perfect. So what? Like, you're not going to get better until you put out ugly. Like, you just got to work through it. And that's where ego gets us into trouble all the time and every day.
Yeah,
and it robs people of the potential to see what they could be.
Well, your company compete every day, and the message that you give, it's a very like you versus you. And 100%. It's like, got to get your ego out of the way to be able to, there you go.
That's so funny.
That's like me there.
For anybody that's listening, hold on a second. For anybody that's listening, he literally opened up his sweater and it shows every day is you versus you under his fleece.
That's great.
On his shirt. That's awesome. And all right, one, the clothing, is that for sale on a website?
Yeah. So everything, we try to make everything easy. So competeeveryday.com is the hub. So you can buy apparel, you can buy my first book, you can pre-order my second book, you can get linked to the podcast or my speaking engagements. We used to have it in a bunch of different places. And as I learned going through the ugly pain of growth, right? How do I just make this
it
as
easy
simple
for
as
people?
possible? Make it easy. So we put everything in one little spot. So yeah, we take messages like this. We have one that we dropped on Black Friday that says, move in silence. Let success make the noise for you. Like, it's all about how do we reinforce the things I talk about on stage, the stuff that's in the book or in the next book, so that people are reminded of it.
I
Every
love
day
that.
I see this, yeah.
I love that.
I'll make sure to link it for everybody in the show notes.
Well, also, is there the opportunity to do co-branded stuff where like a firm can buy it for their business and put their logo and stuff on there with the same slogan that I'm sure you've trademarked everywhere? Which is
So we do a ton of that stuff. So we actually do a lot with events. So a lot of our groups that do our events and stuff, we partner up on that. So we're doing an event in February with a amusement park organization and all of the heads of their parks. And so one of their themes is competing to beat yesterday. And that's one of our shirts is this beat yesterday, compete every day. So we're doing it in a custom color and we're throwing their logo on a sleeve to have out for all their employees. And so we'll do like our custom wristbands, we'll do for events and all sorts of stuff like that. Because for me, it's like the apparel is just there. Like, it's part of a way to reinforce. And we know, similar to the book, right? I come speak at an event. I can give you some additional things that'll extend the life of the learning. We've got an email system for after the talk to keep teaching you, but a shirt, a book is only going to take that 60-minute program and say, how do we make it 6 months? Which then you can really start to stick habits in.
That's awesome. We got to get some TonaLaw stuff.
Yeah. So what you just said, though, is interesting for anybody that's listening to this, because I'm a huge fan of coaching. Mm-hmm. I'm not a huge fan of motivation. I'm a huge fan of discipline. And you can get up on stage and motivate the shit out of everybody. But the reason why people like my company win is because I have the discipline to say, I don't have the discipline to do this on my own. I'm bringing in a specialist for this, right? So we'll be looking at your website about speaking engagements, all of that stuff, because even if it's a short-term gig, what your service is, the service you're selling is, it is not the motivational stuff. No. That's just to get people familiar. I never heard of you prior, but man, I was like, I got to get this guy on a podcast. But because your message is so legit. Like, I realized, and Jules, you could speak to this, we have a firm culture that's built on 6 core values that if I was going to sum them up in 3 words, it's compete every day. And that's a testament to you, because at 55, I'm having the epiphany, like, okay, we call it superior lawyering. We call it people first, which is kind candor, all of these different core values. But what I really want is competitors. What I really want is people that want to win for our clients by getting better 1% every day. Right.
That's the fun. And so that's why I love hearing, like, how does that message fit you? And that's one of the reasons, like, you go to my site or my social media, my tagline is not the motivational speaker you're used to. Because to your point, the feeling of motivation fades. I want you to have a why, a purpose, a motivating factor within you, but I don't want you to worry about that feeling. Because to your point, discipline and consistency far outweighs that feeling of motivation. And so when we put on those programs, that keynote, it's like we talk start, stop, continue, right? What are the things that we can actually put into practice so that when you leave this event and that camp excitement fades, you're like, I'm doing this every week. I'm implementing start, stop, continue with my team now every quarter. And I may not see an immediate result, but I do it every couple of weeks, every 3 weeks, now we're starting to see that payoff.
Right. And so as the leader of the organization, I don't know how big it is, but how has your approach changed? Well, there's something to be said for that in this day and age. And honestly, the internet really does lend itself to that, right? As a solopreneur or whatever it is. Unfortunately, the service that we lend is very labor intensive. And I'm different. But I'm also very blessed. I have a team and a culture that is just, I put them up against any law firm, and we're competitors. So how has your approach to leadership changed from 2011 when you were dealing with shirts out of a car to now your approach to your own leadership?
Yeah, so that's interesting because when it was just me, it was a little bit different, right? I am very much on a culture index type person. I'm a driver. Like that is, I'm driving, get it done, visionary. Like those are it. I know where my wheelhouse is, I know where my sweet spot is. And early on, I struggled from communication I didn't over communicate. Now I'll over communicate exactly what I need, exactly when I expect it, because I just would go into it and was like, well, the people I'm attracting and hiring, like they're going to have a same mindset as me. And that's not the case, right? Everybody's different. And especially when it's your business, you look at it very differently than somebody coming in to work with you. So that part of it has changed. What hasn't changed is everybody I work with that we hire on a contract, part-time, full-time, I expect you bringing your best. When you don't have it, you ask for help. And the biggest one is if you want to do something else long-term, I want to help you succeed at that. Like my first full-ish time hire, when I hired her, I knew it wasn't forever. She wanted to build a yoga company. Like she had this idea to do yoga apparel. She wanted to learn e-commerce in the business. I needed help. It was a perfect pair. She worked with me for like 5 years. She was amazing. When she left, she was going all in on actually something completely different, which I'm super proud of her, and she's crushing it. But I knew from the beginning, like, and I told her, like, you're going to leave one day. All I ask is you give me about a month's heads up, and you never quit on me mentally early. If you decide you're done, you let me know, and then I will tell you everything you want to know about this business and that I've learned and what I've done wrong and what to do right. Like, I want you to go do your thing. Just don't leave me high and dry. And so I look at it now that way. It's the thing we've talked about, Summit we talk about in the next book of like, it's way more important for me now to help other people, especially those on my team, get to where they want to go, even if it means leaving me, because they will far and away be my best recruiters. They will be my best brand advocates. And at the end of the day, if I'm not helping them become successful at what they want to be successful at, it doesn't matter about me. Like I'm not living my mission. And so, sometimes that's hard, right? Because you go through seasons to where, financially, maybe you have to cut back. Maybe you have to cut back on staff or part-time staff or any of that. And so you have to have those tough conversations. But if you keep investing in the person, they also kind of understand part of that picture. And so like with our folks, like I keep them pretty transparent. Here's where we are. Here's what we've done. Here's what's doing well in the company. Hey, here's what's not doing well. If this doesn't course correct, you need to be aware we might need to make some changes. Hey, if you don't step up here, I'm going to over communicate. So that is one of those things that I've learned. And then the second piece ties into that and the communication is just delegation, right? I'm going to get it done. I can do it better. I'm going to do it and go. And as you grow, and as I know, traction definitely teaches you, like you can't. Like you got to have people that do it. And so someone else doing it 90 to 95% as good as you, but frees you up to go do what matters more is way better. And so that's the hardest one for me, A, as an entrepreneur, B, as an only child, and C, as a driver. Like those three, that's a bad combination for somebody to be like, you take this? Yeah, not at all. Right. So that's been the big one. But like the core component of if you can't lead yourself, you can't lead others has been with me since I was 6 and 7 working in my dad's gas station.
I'm sure that you have a ton of examples that you can give about the competitive mindset. I think that what I'm kind of curious about is, so when you start working with somebody, is there an initial assessment period where you go, what kind of competitor am I dealing with?
So it's interesting. So I scaled down a lot of my one-on-one coaching for a couple of reasons, right? I heavily focused in the next book, the course that is coming with it.
What's the name of that book? Got it right here. It's called Lead Better Now. So when you finish the first audiobook, this one will be out into January. Oh, it's the same look. Book 3, 4, awesome. They'll all have a similar look. It's a lot thicker, I'll say, than the first one, but it's all for new managers and new leaders, right? Because what happens? We take A+ performers. He's speaking your language, Jules.
We take ballers. We take those strong performers and we say, hey, you manage people? Good luck. And it's like, hey, Michael Jordan, you were great at basketball. Why aren't you great at baseball? It's a different skill set, different sport.
I'm going to be buying a couple of copies of that book the minute it comes out.
So we got that one. So like I focused in on there. The other thing I found is a lot of my executives that were coming to me, very different challenges. which was fun because it was exciting, but it also was really hard to market some of that stuff. The one thing I found really consistent with my folks that I worked with was they were former athletes, right? They're either still active in a CrossFit or triathlons or things, but they've had athletic sports. So they get the idea of competing. But where they need help is managing people and then really managing their time. Because as we know as a leader, like it's tough. You got to take control of that calendar. So we scaled a lot of that back. Where I actually do the most interviewing is with the clients before a keynote. Because what I want to know is, are you who you actually think you are? Like when I'm interviewing you, are you the same person? And I actually have been tricked before, but I get a really good feel at events. So at the summit, for instance, I had a great conversations with Christina prior. Did an interview with Steve as well on the podcast. So I had a pretty strong feel from there as well as my research online for them. But then when I go to an event, I'm usually there the day before and I'm just casually having conversations with people about experiences because I want to know, do you live up to it? If you do, then I want to figure out how to keep working with you. How do I do next year's summit? How do I get to know and support more members of your community? If you don't, if there's a huge disconnect, then it's, hey, I need to go back to the CEO and say, listen, members got a lot out of this, but there's a big disconnect between what you're thinking you are, what you say you are, and where everybody's receiving it. So let's talk about what are some ideas. It's not as often because a lot of times where you see that it's larger organizations, right? You've got a team and a subculture within a giant global organization. There's only so much they can impact, right? Corporate doesn't always, it has a say in how local and regional works, but it's hard to lead up in that direction. However, the conversation is, here's going to be your ultimate challenges. Here's what you can do. So I don't look as all at that. The one area that I always say is a red flag is if there's a big disconnect or if all you tell me is about your competitors. Like if I know you're so obsessed with everyone else, what they're doing, why we aren't as good as all of that, and you haven't talked about here's where we need to improve, here's our biggest challenge, here's things within our control. If it's always something outside of your control, then I have a concern about even working together as a speaker because I can come in and help. But if you believe all of your problems lie outside of your doors, you're going to have a hard time ever overcoming them.
Right. And the whole thesis behind you, your company, the book, the podcast is it's competition against you, not anybody else. Because you're the only one you control.
I don't control who opens a practice down the street. I control how well we take care of our clients, how well we go find new ones, and how great I take care of my talent so they don't want to leave to go somewhere else.
Right. Right. And it's funny because I do a similar analysis internally in my head when I listen to people talk about their businesses. And I'm like, oh, they're at a certain point. They're not there yet, right? Because they're busy talking about different things that I know where their focus is when I know where they spend their money or they spend their time, right? That'll tell me everything about a person.
Show me your calendar and your bank account. I'll see your priorities, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, you're not the first person to say that on here either.
Yeah. But the other thing too that I get from you is it's not a zero-sum game. You've got a very abundant mindset and an abundant mindset approach, which I love because the people that to me are winning right now at the game of what we do, the business of law, are the ones that are like, oh, I got to defeat so-and-so. I got to bury so-and-so. No, they're about, hey, we have one common agenda. We're all in this together. We all can win. There's plenty of room in the universe for everybody. And I love that. I love that message.
Have you read Simon Sinek's The Infinite Game?
I have not.
So it's a similar deal. So the ones that are like, I have to beat you are in the finite game. And one of his famous examples is the Samsung versus Apple, like the BlackBerry versus the iPhone. And he said when he met with Samsung, it was all about how this BlackBerry was going to beat the iPhone. It was better than the iPhone and they were going to beat Apple and all this. And he got they gave him a new tablet. Well, then he had another deal with Apple that year. And he brings this tablet. He's like, I'm going to have a little fun with this. And he shows the Apple exec. He's like, look at this cool new tablet. It does a couple of things the iPad doesn't. And the Apple guy was like, oh, that's awesome. Good for them. He's like, always be innovating. Didn't even care. And he was like, oh. He said, because BlackBerry or Samsung, whoever it was, is competing directly with Apple. And Apple's playing the long game of how do we just get better?
What do our customers want?
Yeah, what do our customers want? So he's thinking the infinite game, right? And that's really how I try to operate, because as I was telling a group of aspiring speakers this morning, like over the course of the year, I've sent 5 or 6 opportunities to other speakers. Either I was booked, I had a conflict, their budget didn't fit, or they booked me last year and they needed a referral. At the same time, I've had other speakers send me gigs that they couldn't do. Now, I cut a check. I pay speakers, hey, you send me a gig, here's 10 to 20%. Just the same, they'll do the same for me. Because I realize like I'm not going to speak to the same group every single year. Maybe I'll get 2 years in a row, but probably not 3. Usually it's speak to this group, come back in 2 to 3 years, right? So how can I serve my clients who I like by making sure they get a good quality speaker who's going to take care of them? And how can I help that speaker? Because I know at some point there's going to come another opportunity. And so when I get out of the idea that it's me versus you, and I can start looking at other speakers who are crush it on stage and say, what do you do really well? Oh, it's your blocking. Oh, how you told that story is fantastic. Like, I want to take notes on what they're doing, not to be like, oh, I'm going to be better than you, but like, you do that really well. I want to learn it. I don't want to copy you. I want to learn it. And so that changes the whole dynamic, because a lot of our problem in the comparison game goes back to ego, right? We're either inflating our ego because we're better than our next door neighbor, or we're killing ourselves in our ego because we're not as good as our neighbor. When all of our happiness is tied up in how we compare to someone else, versus that guy was born on third, had $1 million in his pocket before he graduated high school from mom and dad, built all this stuff, but it's not the real thing. It looks that way, versus you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps, paid your way through college, paid your way through law school, built your practice. You are doing everything you can with everything you've got. Like, that's something to be proud of.
Right.
But the problem is when you're comparing yourself to everyone else, or more than likely, we only see snapshots because you don't know what the P&L looks like for that practice down the street, right? We don't know what somebody's life looks like behind that social media post. Then we're really doing ourselves a disservice versus measuring ourselves against our own full potential and trying to bridge that gap.
Right. I love it. And as you're saying it, I'm thinking time is finite, opportunities are not. Right. Like, and you have an abundance mindset that just when you're disclosing the back operations of how you do it when you can't do it, but there's an opportunity for somebody else, that opens up more opportunities for you down the road.
100%. And it helps everyone win. It's not like, well, if I don't get it, you don't get it. Right. It's like, no, dude, go crush it. At the very least, all you're going to do is raise the bar and expectations for me next year, which forces me to grow and improve.
Right. And that's the thing that I think that people just need to embrace, that you're competing against what you were, right? Yep. And every day, an incremental change turns into a massive overhaul in a 1-year period. And a 10-year period is even more monumental, right?
Yeah. You go into a room like, say the summit, for example, you go into a room like that, a lot of successful people. You can go in measuring yourself against everyone, beating yourself up for who you're not better than or who you're behind. Or you can go into that room inspired and say, man, there's some people in here doing some awesome things. What can I learn from them? And how do I raise my game next year? How do I get better next year? Because I never want to walk into a room where I'm the most qualified and most successful.
I always want to be the smallest guy in the room to learn from the bigger guys.
That's right. That's right.
Talk to me about Lego-sized choices, because I read that in your write-up and I was like, I love it. Talk to me about Lego-sized choices.
I mean, it's the perfect time of year, right? We're recording this December 20th. We're heading into a new year. Everybody comes out of the gate, hair on fire, right? They are guns blazing. I'm changing everything. 2024 is the year, and we burn ourselves out. It's trying to do anything too big, too quickly. You just can't do it. And so I always talk about Lego blocks, because a single Lego block by itself is worthless. Like, the only thing it's good for is finding a barefoot when you're walking through the house. Like, otherwise it's worthless. But you stack enough of them on top of each other, you build epic things. Like, if you Google world's largest Lego creations, you would be amazed at what's out there. Like, it's mind-boggling what people put together with these teeny tiny blocks. So with this, that's the way I try to look at it. James Clear frames it as atomic habits. BJ Fogg talks tiny habits. I always think Legos, because I played with Legos as a kid. And I remember loving to play with Legos and loving having built something out of them. And so when we look at it, instead of changing everything this new year, like what's 1 to 2 little bitty things that you could actually follow through with, that you could change, that you could build? And so what we did, one of the things I did for that was, how do I make it easier, right? That's the big question James Clear asked. How do you make it easier? How do you make building a new habit easier? So we just started a challenge. So in January, we're kicking off a challenge. I have like 7 things, teeny tiny things that I'm going to do throughout the course of the month. And I was like, hey, I need accountability. You want to jump in? It's like over the course of the month, read 2 books. Every day, do 100 push-ups. Review your goals every morning. Put them on your computer. Make sure you review your goals every morning. Text a different friend every day to check in on somebody. And what I said is like, doing this once doesn't do anything. But if you do this January challenge and February changes a little bit, March changes a little bit, over the course of a year, you will have stacked Lego blocks that will 100% have made you better physically, mentally, relationally, financially in some months, and as a leader. And if you do that, you'll see a payoff in 12 months. You won't see a payoff in the moment, but you'll see it over 12 months. And so that's how we always try to look at it is, if you feel unmotivated today, say, what's one little bitty thing on my to-do list? Like if I got off before tomorrow, I would have some momentum. If I want to start a podcast, like what's the one thing I want to do? Cool, I'm going to order a microphone. I'm going to have it here on my desk. I'm going to make it real. Like I'm going to start small so that I can build it at a pace that's going to last versus I'm going to try to do everything all at once and burn myself out.
Yeah,
I love that.
So do I. And I can see Jules's face too, because we talk about this stuff all the time. And it's funny because, just as an aside, I love Lego building. My daughter was big into Legos, and it used to be like a meditative state for me because it was just so relaxing. Putting them together with her are some of my fondest memories. I still would go out and buy a Lego set today and sit down and do it for hours.
I still do Legos. I love Legos.
I think that's awesome. I do. So, and it's funny that you say that too, because I'm a big on habit building, right? Same type of thing. And often, like I'll have a conversation with Jules or somebody else in the office, and I'll say, look, one of the biggest things we need to do as, thought leaders in the business and leaders and owning our roles is take care of ourselves, right? So if you know you're having a high stress situation, maybe you need to incorporate meditation. And somebody's answer was, I can't meditate. I said, can you meditate for 1 minute every day? Right? Do 1 minute. I'll send you the Headspace app. 1 minute.
I think he's talking about me.
I am talking about you. But the funny part of it is, you send them the Headspace app and then we hold each other accountable. Like I've been meditating for years, but that got me back into it. And I'm back on the train of doing 15, 20 minutes every morning. And it does change the game, man. Like I'm a better leader when I'm meditating. I just am.
Jules, I can feel you as somebody who has ADHD. The idea of sitting still in silence for 20 minutes is hell on earth.
It's still hard.
It is. But here's the deal. You take the Headspace app, you do 1 minute, just 1 minute. And then you use the HabitShare app to check the box. Because what HabitShare does is it connects you with friends, coworkers, other people doing something, trying to build a habit. And every day you do it, you complete it, you check the box, yes or no. And it sends them a notification. Jules did it, Jules didn't do it. I use it with my coaching clients. Because here's what it was. Like one of my coaching clients hated this idea of journaling. Hated the idea of journaling. He's like, I don't want to write, I don't want to do a diary, whatever. We have a journal. It's a very basic, it's literally a starter journal of like, what are your 3 priorities for the day? What are you grateful for? Set your intention. So with him, every day he had a journal. Like, you're going to give me 3 things you're grateful for and what your intent, like that's it. It can be your dog slept through the night, your cup of coffee, and you had a good run, like whatever it is. But when you do it, you have to check the box. And so I would get notifications and it shows me the streak. And so if he ever got to where it was 2 to 3 days of miss, I could text him, hey, what's going on here? Let's restart this. Just do one thing tomorrow. Start the habit of, but it allows that level of accountability as well as somebody to check in on you.
I love that. Jules, we're going to have to look at the notes. I love that idea.
So cool.
HabitShare is the app. It's a free app for your phone. It's fantastic.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm going to look at that. Because again, I do feel like for me, it's not for everybody, but I've never been diagnosed. I definitely have a monkey mind though. My mind is literally 800 miles an hour every day, all day long. So if I ever go to a doctor, they'll probably tell me I do have that. But meditation is the single biggest game changer when I'm disciplined enough and I make myself do it every day. Every single day. So yeah, I 100%. I feel like I could talk to you all day long about this stuff, but you've spent a lot of time and you've been very gracious. And I think that the value you put out, the book, the podcast, the speaking engagements, you're a man on a mission. And I love the message. So thank you for putting that stuff out. I ask this of every podcast guest. I have these things in life that are called needle movers, right? Like you mentioned 2 people that were inflection points for you that you didn't even know were going to change your life. What would you say if you had to pick the single biggest needle mover to date in your life? What would you say is the biggest needle mover?
The single biggest needle. I mean, for me, obviously, I would say from a decision point, it was launching my company. Like that was the game changer. But from a Lego block choice that I do every day, I think needle is like teeny tiny, right?
Right.
It's taking care of my body. It's physically making myself uncomfortable working out more than anything else. It clears my mind. It gives me the strength and energy to do the work I do. It allows me to build mental toughness and mindfulness, because when you're under a heavy weight or you're tired, you have to focus on being in that moment versus, did I send that email? Do I have these sales calls? Like all of that kind of stuff. So physically putting myself in uncomfortable positions and challenges has been the biggest one for me. But the single biggest decision I think that moved everything for me was just saying, you know what? I'm going to give this whole shirt thing an idea try and let's see what happens.
Yeah. That's awesome.
We definitely agree with you on the physical part.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. We're constantly, everybody in the office, it's crazy. Like we have somebody in our office who is like a different person now. I think she's lost 100 pounds, and she's documented her journey on Instagram. And we just encourage, like one of our core values is, well, it's discipline, but it's also innovation and improvement, right? So in-house, we have 25 people. We have 15 people overseas. Everybody is committed to innovating and improving personally, professionally. And we look for that when we hire. And if there's not alignment, typically those people don't end up sticking around because that's who we are. We are an innovative law firm in a field where people don't innovate. Right?
True.
Yeah.
So, and that gives you a competitive edge, right?
It does.
Right. So, but we're also, it's about improvement of ourselves. We're not improving to beat the guy down the block, like you said. We're looking to improve our client's customer experience, the client experience, that type of stuff.
Love it. So that just means when I'm up in the Northeast next, we'll just grab a workout. We'll grab a team workout sometime.
Absolutely. And I just want to say thanks for coming on, man. It's been awesome having you.
Absolutely enjoyed it. I appreciate you so much for asking and getting time to jam with you and Jules. And hey, maybe I'll see you at next year's summit. We'll see.
You will.
Yes.
You will.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
sure if you're going to be there, I'll be there. So
I'm gonna hammer and bug Steve and Christina to bring me back because we got a new book and I enjoyed hanging out with y'all. Y'all were a lot of fun. I can't say that after every event. I won't say that after every event. Y'all were a ton of fun. So
I appreciate that, man. And I appreciate you. Thank you. And I think that the world needs more people like you. Like I'm a huge fan of Life is Good. And now I am going to be repeating the mantra in my head every day, compete every day. Because that's what I want to do is compete every day. So thank you, man.
Thanks,
I
y'all.
appreciate it. Thank you.